There is a photograph in my mind I will never be able to take down. I am 8 years old. It is a morning in October and the frost is still on the grass, and I am walking the dirt lane to the schoolhouse with my lunch pail knocking against my leg. The schoolhouse is a single white room with one chimney and a bell on a little frame out front, and inside it there is one teacher and 20-some children and 8 grades all at once, 1st through 8th, and nothing after that. Nothing. I did not know yet that the room I was walking toward was also the edge of the map. I did not know that the whole of my schooling, every year of it, would end before I was old enough to drive a car in the world outside. Tonight I want to walk you back into that one room with me and show you why the Amish stop school at the 8th grade and what that ending really costs a child who loves to learn. My name is Jacob. I grew up Old Order Amish. I knelt on a wooden floor and was baptized into the church, and some years later I left it. I love these people. I want you to hear that before anything else, because what I am about to tell you is not an accusation. It is a confession, and it is grief. The 8th grade was not the end of my education by accident. It was the end of my education by design, and I want to show you, one piece at a time, exactly how that design was built and what it was built to do. So let me start in the schoolhouse itself. The school I attended was not a public school. It was a parochial school, built by the parents of the community on a corner of someone's farm with the men's own hands and the community's own money. The Amish pay their school taxes like anyone else and then build a second school of their own and pay for that one too, because they will not send their children into the world's classrooms. One room, a wood stove in the middle, long benches, the little ones in front and the older ones in the back, a blackboard, a water bucket with one tin dipper we all drank from, and at the front a teacher. Now here is the thing the outside world almost never understands about that teacher. She was usually a young unmarried woman, often only 18 or 19 years old, and she herself had only finished the 8th grade. She had no college, she had no teaching certificate, she had no training but the years she had spent on those same benches as a girl. She taught all 8 grades at once, by herself, calling one row up to the front while the rest worked silently, then the next row, all day long, every subject. She was a good and faithful woman, and she taught us our letters and our sums and our penmanship with real care. And she held the whole room together with nothing but a soft voice and the respect we were raised to give her. But she could not take us one step past where she herself had been allowed to go. The ceiling of my education was the ceiling of hers, and hers was the ceiling of the woman who taught her. That is the first thing they don't want you to know, that the limit is not a thing that happens to one child in one school. It is a wall that has been standing for generations, and each teacher can only carry you as far as she was carried, and not 1 foot further. Now let me tell you about the language, because the language is where the design starts to show. In that schoolhouse the lessons were in English. The reading, the spelling, the arithmetic, all of it in English. But English was not my language. At home we spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, the old German dialect, the tongue I dreamed in and prayed in and was scolded in. In church the Bible was read in High German, a language even the grown men only half understood. So picture what that does to a child. I went to school each day to learn a language that no one I loved actually spoke, and I went home each night to a language that was never once written on that blackboard. English was the tool you used to deal with the outside world, with the storekeeper and the auctioneer and the doctor. It was never meant to be the language of your soul, and the schooling gave me exactly enough English to buy feed and sign a check and read a road sign, and not 1 word more than that. Just enough to function in the English world, never enough to belong to it. That is the second thing they don't want you to know, that the 2 languages are not an accident of geography, they are a fence. 1 tongue to keep you safe inside the community, and a second tongue handed to you in careful, measured doses, only as much as the outside requires, and never enough to make the outside feel like home. Now stay with me, because this next one is the one they punish you for telling, and it is the one that turned the whole thing into law. For most of American history, every state required children to attend school until they were 15 or 16. That meant the Amish were breaking the law every single year because their children walked out of the schoolhouse at 14 and never went back. Amish fathers were fined. Some were jailed. And then in 1972, a case made its way all the way to the highest court in the country. It was called Wisconsin versus Yoder. 3 Amish fathers had refused to send their children to high school, and the state of Wisconsin had taken them to court, and the case climbed and climbed until it stood before the Supreme Court of the United States. And the court ruled for the fathers. It ruled that forcing Amish children into high school would do real damage to their way of life, and that the family's freedom of religion outweighed the state's interest in 2 more years of school. So it became the law of the land that the Amish could stop educating their children after the 8th grade. People hear that and they think it sounds like a victory for freedom, and in one way it was, but sit with what it actually did. A courtroom in Washington built a permanent wall around an Amish childhood. It made it legal forever to close the schoolhouse door on a 14-year-old who might have wanted to walk through it. The state stopped knocking. The wall became official. That is the third thing they don't want you to know, that the 8th grade ending is not just a tradition the community quietly keeps. It is a right the community went all the way to the Supreme Court to defend, so that no child of theirs would ever again be pulled toward a classroom the church did not control. If there is any value at all in hearing this world told honestly, from the inside, by someone who lived it, take 1 second and subscribe, and leave a single word in the comments for me. Just the word stay. That one word tells me there are people out here who want me to keep telling these things, and it costs you nothing but a moment. Now let me show you the reason underneath all of it, the real reason the door closes at 14. Because you might be thinking the Amish stop school to save money, or because they need the children to work. And that is part of it, but it is not the heart of it. The heart of it is a word. The word is Gelassenheit. It is hard to put into English, but it means something like yielding, submission, the lowering of the self, the willingness to be small, to give up your own wants, to bend yourself to God and to the church, and to the way things have always been done. Gelassenheit is the highest virtue in our world. And here is what that has to do with school. Higher learning, the church teaches, feeds the opposite of Gelassenheit. It feeds the self. It teaches a child to ask why, to question, to want to know more, to imagine being something other than what his father was. And that wanting, that reaching, has a name too. The old people call it Hochmut, pride, the deadliest thing a person can carry. So a child who loves books, a child who finishes his lessons early and asks the teacher for harder ones, a child who lies awake wondering how far away the stars are, that child is not praised in our world. He is watched. Gently, lovingly, but watched. Because his curiosity is read not as a gift but as a danger, the first green shoot of the pride that pulls people away from God and away from the community. I was that child. I will not pretend I was not. I finished my work and I wanted more, and I asked the teacher once if there were books past the 8th grade ones, and the way her face changed taught me more than any lesson on that blackboard ever did. It was not anger, it was worry for me. I learned that day to stop asking out loud. There is a saying the old people have, that a nail that stands up gets hammered down, and I understood, young as I was, that my questions were making me a nail standing up. So I lowered my head and finished my sums and kept the wondering inside where no one could see it. I was told kindly by people who loved me that wanting more was the beginning of wanting to be better than my brothers, and that a man who thinks himself above his neighbors has already half left the church. That is the fourth thing they don't want you to know, that the schooling does not end at the 8th grade because there is nothing left to teach. It ends there because, past a certain point, learning itself is treated as a temptation, and a curious child is treated as a soul in quiet danger. So, if school ends at 14, what takes its place? Because the children do not sit idle. Let me tell you what replaces high school. What replaces it is work, real, full, grown-up work, years before the English world would ever call you grown. The day after a boy finishes the 8th grade, he is not a student anymore, he is an apprentice. He goes to the family farm, or to his father's shop, or to a sawmill or a harness shop or a furniture maker, and he begins to learn a trade with his hands, all day, every day. A girl goes to the kitchen and the garden and the sewing table, and she learns to run a household, and she takes charge of the younger children. This is not cruelty. I want to be fair. An Amish 14-year-old can do things that astonish the outside world. He can frame a barn, doctor a sick animal, run a team of horses, build a piece of furniture that will outlast him. There is real dignity in it and real skill, and I carry some of those skills to this day, and I am grateful for them. But understand what the trade is underneath the dignity. It is the lid on the box. The day you take up the trade is the day your future quietly closes around you. You will be a farmer, or a carpenter, or a buggy maker, like your father, in this community for the rest of your life. There is no other shelf to reach for because you were taken out of the room with the shelves at 14. That is the fifth thing they don't want you to know, that the apprenticeship is not just a practical replacement for high school. It is the thing that sets your whole life in place at 14 years old and seals it so that the question of who you might have become is answered before you are even old enough to ask it. And that brings me to the last thing, the heaviest one, the one I almost did not say out loud tonight. Because here is what the 8th grade education really is for anyone who ever thinks about leaving. It is the lock on the door. When I finally walked away from the only world I had ever known, I walked out with an 8th grade education and nothing in my hand to prove even that. No diploma, no transcript, no high school behind me, no GED, no record that I had ever sat in a classroom at all. I was a grown man trying to begin an adult life in the English world with the schooling of a 14-year-old. Do you understand what that means? Every door I tried to open asked me for papers I did not have. Every form asked for a level of school I had never reached. I had to start over from the bottom, alone, and teach myself in the dark the things other people learned in the light, in rooms, with teachers, when they were young. And I will tell you something I have never said before. There were a few of us, even inside, who knew, who felt the wall and quietly tried to climb it. I knew a boy who hid a library book under the hay in the barn and read it by lantern. I knew a young man who got hold of a worn study guide for a test he was not supposed to take and worked through it in secret, line by line, so that one day he might have the schooling the community would never give him. We did it quietly, like a sin, because that is what it would have been called. That is the 6th thing they don't want you to know. That the 8th grade education is not only a limit on what a child may learn, it is the seal on the exit. It is built so that leaving will cost you everything, so that the world outside will feel impossible, so that the safest and easiest thing, always, is to simply stay. So let me tell you what the leaving actually cost, and what I want you to take from all of this. It cost me years. Years I will not get back, spent learning alone what should have been given to me freely as a child. It cost me the certainty that I was smart enough, because when you are told from the age of 8 that your hunger to know is a kind of pride, you carry that voice in your head for a long, long time. And even now, on hard days, I hear it. And it cost me the simple thing of being able to sit in my mother's kitchen and tell her, without it breaking her heart, that I went and got the education she was taught to fear for me. But I want to be honest with you about the other side of it too, because if I only showed you the wall, I would be lying about my own people. The Amish are not foolish, and they are not cruel. They built that wall out of love, the only way they knew. They looked at the world, at all its noise and its hurry and its endless wanting, and they decided to protect their children from it by keeping them small and quiet and close to home and close to God. They truly believe that a humble life with an 8th grade education and a trade and a church is a richer life than anything a university could offer. And on their best days, in their quietest evenings, with the lamp lit and the family gathered and no engine running anywhere for miles, I am not always sure they are wrong. That is the thing I want the world to know, that the schoolhouse door closing at 14 is not a simple evil. It is a hard and human choice made by good people that gives a child peace and safety and belonging, and takes from that same child the right to choose his own mind. Both of those things are true at the same time. That is what I lived. That is what I left. I wrote down the rest of it. The parts I could not fit into one evening, the deeper things, the names and the years and the quiet moments that don't survive on a platform like this one. If you want the full story, the whole of what it was to be raised inside that one white room and then to walk out of it for good, the pages are waiting for you in the first pinned comment below. That is all. Thank you for staying with me. I'll see you next time.